Oxygen from Sterlite Copper permission capacity and road ahead, Indian Express explained article. The Sterlite Copper plant has been shut for 3 years following public protest and police firing that killed 13 protesters in May 2018. The Supreme Court on Tuesday allowed Vedanta Limited to operate its oxygen production unit at Sterlite Copper plant in Thoothukudi in Tamil Nadu. The Sterlite Copper plant has been shut for 3 years following public protest and police firing that killed 13 protesters in May 2018. The Supreme Court decision follows a submission by Vedanta Limited, which cited the ongoing crisis for medical oxygen triggered by a surge in COVID-19 cases across the country. How it went to court? Vedanta Limited has moved the Supreme Court last requesting an emergency hearing. Citing the medical oxygen crisis, it asserted that it could produce 1,000 tons of oxygen if the plant was allowed to open. On the court's suggestion, Tamil Nadu government, which was initially against the idea, held a public hearing in Thoothukudi last week, where most stakeholders opposed the proposal, alleging that it was strategy by Vedanta to reopen the entire plant. On Monday, Chief Minister E. Pallaswamy met representatives of all major political parties. The meeting resolved that the plant would be allowed to reopen conditionally, only for standalone operations of oxygen production and for 4 months, strictly under the monitoring of the state and district administration, and Tamil Nadu's requirement would be prioritized before supplying this oxygen to other states. The oxygen crisis. There are many suppliers of liquid oxygen in the southern region, including Sri Perumbudur near Chennai. A portion of it is used for medical purposes earlier too, when the bulk went for industrial purposes. Data in public domain shows that the average liquid oxygen capacity of India is 7,200 metric tons a day, of which 800 tons was the requirement of medical purposes. Before the pandemic, demand went up to 2,000 per day during the first wave around September 2020. Oxygen in copper plant. The Vedanta Limited plant has 2 oxygen production units lying idle with a combined capacity of 1,050 tons. The oxygen from these units is meant to feed the furnaces of the copper melting plant. These facilities suck in air from atmosphere, which is processed so that the oxygen-rich fraction of the air is absorbed in the final process. Vedanta Limited has claimed in the Supreme Court that it can produce 1,000 tons of oxygen. The state government, however, has submitted in the Madras High Court that the plant has a production capacity of 1,050 tons and only 35 tons can be used for medical purposes. Advocate General Vijay Narayan said, what is required is liquid oxygen with at least 99.4% purity for medical use, while industrial oxygen has 92 to 93% purity. The state submitted the Sterlite also has to install compression and bottling plants to convert gaseous oxygen to liquid oxygen, a process that will take minimum 6 months. Sterlite has agreed to set up compression and bottling plants as soon as possible. The oxygen produced at Sterlite's unit is crude oxygen. However, on Tuesday, at Vedanta Limited submitted the Supreme Court that it would be able to produce 200 metric tons of liquid oxygen within 10 days' time, a source in Vedanta Limited told. The Indian expressed that the remaining 800 tons will be produced as gaseous oxygen, and they are in talks with different stakeholders in the government and private sector to figure out how it can be able to made available for medical use. Local concern. Sterlite Copper has been facing protests ever since its inception in 1994. The local communities concerned include hazardous industrial operations that produce toxins such as lead, arsenic, sulfur oxides, pollution of the environment, and their impact on public health. Following a gas leak on March 2013, the state government ordered shutting down of the plant, and the Supreme Court fined Sterlite ₹100 crore for flouting environment norms the following month. But the plant was in operation in June again. It was shut down again following the violent protest and police firing in May 2018. On Tuesday, Justice D.Y. Churchwood said in Supreme Court, the nation must stand together in this moment. He was referring to the medical emergency. Oxygen production will now depend on maintenance and repair at a plant lying unusual for 3 years. The local population will be apprehensive of any deviation from the agreement to produce oxygen only for medical purposes. Thank you.